All right, well, welcome to the Sports Guys for another episode. Really glad you guys are here this week. And we have a great topic for you, something that's been on my mind for a while. I was just telling these two fine gentlemen on the panel that I've loved college sports my whole life, and I've always loved it more than pro sports. And the reason always was because the players playing it were doing it for the passion of the game, the love of the game, the love of their school. They were doing it with the marching bands behind them and the students behind them. And that always, for me, was the really special part of what made college athletics. And, I wonder where that's going with all of the changes that are coming from pay to play to NIL to transfer portal to, all kinds of ways that sports are changing right now. So really excited to bring this topic to you today, guys. And let me start with how you doing, Robbie?
Doing great.
Awesome. I like your money behind you there. Color of money.
Yep.
Want to also welcome Jackson Moore. How you doing, Jackson?
I'm good. How are you?
Really
Hey,
glad
Jack.
you joined us this week. You're going to give us really valuable perspective since you're a D1 athlete and you've just been through the transfer process. So really excited to get your take on it. So really thanks for joining.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's just start with kind of our overall impression before we get into the presentation and just, what do you think of college sports, where it is today, where it was before, and where do you think it's going? And, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Maybe it's a little bit of both. So, Robbie, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really complicated issue. I don't know that one podcast can cover all the different pieces of it. And one thing I would say is I think we're in a transition period. So things look messy, but not to worry. I think college athletics are in really good shape. The athletes themselves, the way they're conducting themselves, I think they're preparing really well for the major leagues, whether it's baseball, football, whatever. So college is preparing these people for life, which is great. They're learning a lot. They're preparing for the big leagues. But there's a really messy situation right now with the way things are. And I think we're just kind of looking at an unfinished cake with, ingredients all over the ceiling. And I think it's going to be okay. I do think it's a complicated situation. I think that there's three main elements to it, and they all need to be worked out on their own timeline. Some pieces might come together quicker than others with compromises and some logical, sober thinking. But I'm really excited to see where this ends up 5 to 10 years from now. But I do have concerns about where it is right now. And so it'll be really interesting to see Jackson's thoughts as a current athlete. Younger generation sort of looking at the landscape is just so different than when we were coming up. So trying to absorb how we got here and where we're headed. I don't think we really know where we're headed, but I do think that the athletes themselves have a lot of good thoughts on this because it pertains to them. They're looking over in their locker room at somebody who's getting paid a lot and they're not. And I'm sure there's a lot of weird feelings in there, but they're happy for their friend. It's got to be really a strange thing. But I think the idea that right now there's unlimited free agency, I think that will end. I think there'll be some strings attached to the NIL. Transfer portal gets complicated right now. I think there'll be some clarifying rules coming down the pike. And pay to play is very tricky. So I think where we are is a messy situation, but I'm not pessimistic about it.
That makes sense. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
Yes, sir. Well, I think coming from a D1 athlete that right now it's in a pretty good state. I mean, obviously there's things that could always be better. But I feel like it's definitely developed a lot. Being pretty new, I haven't really been able to be a part of what it used to be like. So now with all the NIL deals, with all that stuff, I think it definitely opens a lot of doors for opportunities because if, for say, you don't make it to the league, you don't make it professional in any sport, you make a lot of connections with working with these businesses and working with other people that could help you with your lifelong journey other than just sports. And as well as obviously getting an opportunity to get a little bit of money because
Mhm.
we're very busy. You don't get time to get a job. You can't really work even if you're just a walk-on. So being able to use your name a little bit and just make a little bit of money, I feel like is definitely helpful. As well as the new NCAA video game just came out, so I feel like that pertains to a lot of athletes and a lot of the younger generation, especially to get people more interested in the sport and in the game. And I feel like it's definitely going in a positive direction.
I really like your positive spin on it there, and that gives me hope because obviously I've been a little bit concerned about, college sports in general the last 2 years. I like what you said there. It may give you some skills on how to market yourself, even beyond sports. And
For
like you
sure.
said, I was just asking Jackson before the program, when are you going to be at App State to start working out? I thought he was going to tell me like late July or something for training camp, and he told me he's going at the end of May. That basically it's a year-round program. They're working with the coaches year-round. He'll be in the stadium just in 2 weeks. So, that tells me that you're right, Jackson. There has to be some compensation because these guys are being asked to be training, year-round, every single day, multiple practices a day in the weight room, and they don't really have a chance to make money otherwise. So I do think there's got to be some happy medium, some compromise there that these guys are being asked to sacrifice that much.
I have a couple more thoughts too. I saw some kind of podcast or something recently, and they said, "Do you want your child to be a D1 athlete?" And they said, "If so, what are you willing to compromise and sacrifice?" And so I think to become a D1 athlete, such a small percentage of high school athletes become a D1 athlete, you really do have to sacrifice quite a bit. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about these students, these college students getting compensated. They really have given up a lot to get there. And the second point would be this is kind of exciting because if you were to get a contract that for your 3 or 4 years, a couple $100,000 over those years, that might be enough to come out and buy a house and kind of set up
Mm-hmm.
future family. And then you need to use your skills you learned in school. So it might be a lot more bright of a future for a good player who's not going to make the big league in whatever sport they're playing. But at the same time, they got compensated to the point where they had a nice little nest egg and it
Right.
launched them into their life, because buying a house now is so much more expensive than it was even 10 years ago, that if they could parlay that into a future house payment or something like that, down payment, that's really exciting because now they can set up a family with a lot more flexibility. And
No
so
doubt.
the future kind of launches from a better platform.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from you, gentlemen? Otherwise, I'll kind of give you my general thoughts. So I've just been thinking about it. I told you about why I've always loved college sports, and I still like it more than I like the pros. My biggest concern is that it looks to me like this is the professionalization of college sports, and I think it's inevitable at this point. I mean, whether we like it or not, these lawsuits that are going through the courts are going to force professionalization. It's going to happen. So now the question is, can we afford it? What can we afford? And how can we maintain competitive balance? How can we make sure it's not just Alabama, Clemson, and Michigan winning it every year? How can we make sure we have more teams that actually have a chance? And so from my perspective, you've got to have something like a salary cap, very similar to what the NFL has and NBA has and other sports, where teams can only spend a certain amount of money on salaries. And that provides that competitive balance and makes sure all the teams have a fair chance. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that there's some sort of truth in that. I also feel like there are people that do transfer to demand more money, but in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cases, a lot of the transferring happens for opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And also just how how like a university may recruit you is a big thing, because the Alabamas, the Georgias, those guys may recruit better than some of the smaller schools, may offer more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I feel like there is some truth to maybe salary cap might be a good idea, but as well as um, I don't know if it would help a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. So when you were making your decision, or when you talk to other athletes making their decision, is it more about opportunity and playing time, or is it more about, I want to get the bag, I want to get the NIL, or is it in the old days it used to be about great facilities, great fan base, our fans are going to show up, 100,000 people pack the stadium and tailgate all day waiting for the game. What are the motivations now for the current D1 athlete?
Well, in my case, was opportunity. Because obviously, we all go to college to play a sport, and the ultimate goal is to make it to the league.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people that are driven in different ways, such as
Mhm.
the money aspect. There was people that were in perfectly good situations at the school that they were already in, but they demanded more money and they weren't given more money,
Mhm.
and so they entered the transfer portal.
Mhm.
I think in that aspect, it has made the sport more of like a business, and
Right.
it has maybe taken away a little bit from the classic fun, classic like game day experience, and it's made it more professional, more like the NFL, which is,
Right.
like you said, which is not what we want, because people, instead of playing for the university, playing for pride, they're playing for money.
Mhm.
Um, but then there is, like in my case, there's a lot of kids that want the opportunity, that wanna make their dreams a reality, and wanna really go and make it far and have a shot at the big leagues, and maybe transferring up a level or transferring down a level, whatever it may be. I think the facilities and all that is definitely a good bonus, but I feel like for most people, it's probably bottom of the barrel of what they're worried
Yeah.
about. Most people are worried about getting opportunity as well as, and then money.
And that's what concerns me, because as a University of Virginia fan, lately they've been touting, we've been upgrading the facilities, and that's fantastic. But I was suspecting you were going to say exactly what you said, which is that facilities maybe were great 20 years ago, but now it's much more about, am I going to get playing time? Am I going to get the bag? Am I going to have an NFL shot? What kind of coaching am I going to get? Um, and am I going to be in one of the prime conferences? Am I going to be on TV? Those are much more important, I think, than facilities, as an example. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it kind of confirmed what I thought would be the case.
I do think we've seen a variety of reasons to transfer. The one that I'm the most comfortable with is somebody who's trying to get more playing time, who can pour themselves more into the sport. But we've seen people transfer to be closer to their girlfriend. People transfer because the coach yelled at them one day. It's an individual decision, and I don't think you can really legislate all of those things out. Um, I'm really excited that students get to kind of do what's best for them. Um, but I think that the most virtuous ones are the ones who want to play more. Um,
Yeah.
the ones who want more money, I don't begrudge them. I just, to me, they kind of lose me a little bit as far as how much 100% support behind them is you know, uh, I'm not there. Maybe I'm too old school. But I want them to do as well as they possibly can. So in that way, I'm fine with it. But at the same time, I think there have to be some rules. And what I was investigating, um, there are rules on it. So I don't feel as uncomfortable as when I first started, when I thought it was just the Wild West where you could transfer anytime, go anywhere you want. There's a lot more restrictions than that. But I'm glad that student athletes are able to better their situation. Sometimes it's not a fit with the coach or the program. Sometimes they just recruited up some star that's going to take your spot, and you're still doing a good job. It's just you run into an All-American or something, and maybe you want to play. And so,
Want to
um,
play, or in some cases you want to move closer to home so your parents can come see you play, your
yeah,
family can come see you play.
all
We
those things.
we had a basketball player on Virginia do that last year, and it was really disappointing because we were excited to see him play, but he
Yeah.
ended up transferring back home to Creighton to be closer to his family in Nebraska. So, and obviously you're going to have the Moore family at a lot more app games, I would assume, than UK
For
games, right?
sure.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So very cool. Well,
And
excited
just like
about
4 years is a real short period of time of eligibility. So you just have to do the best possible thing you can for yourself for that. Give yourself to the school as hard as you can. And if the situation isn't quite right, make a change. And then the 4 years is gone. So, people think of college as a long period of time, but it's really not.
For sure.
So
my first year already flew by.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And it goes faster and faster, by the way.
I was reading your press release when you committed to Kentucky a year ago for 2023, and there was a lot of excitement around that. So, what was your overall feeling as a first-year player? I know you didn't get to play very much, but what was your overall feeling playing in the SEC?
It was definitely scary going into it. Coming in as a 17, 18-year-old, however old you are when you go to college, especially if you graduate earlier from high school, you're going straight into the big leagues pretty much. The SEC is arguably the best conference in college football. It's the most similar to the NFL. You're playing in front of 100,000 fans on Saturdays, and that can be really scary, especially as a young kid, somebody that hasn't developed the mental game as much as the physical game.
Right.
Because at that point in time, everybody's good. Everybody is skillful. Everybody is strong. But really, where it separates at such a young age is your mental, your mentality. It's very hard to block out any noise, block out any coaches, block out any fans. For a kicker, if you miss a kick, there's going to be social media posts about it. There's going to be people, oh, I could have made that. Like, this kid sucks, blah, 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 blah. But so just blocking out those things and keeping your mental state, keeping it at a high and kind of blocking out everything else around is definitely what separates the good from the great. But I mean, it was a great experience playing in the SEC for my first year. I got to play against and compete with the best of the best. Got to play against teams that I used to watch on TV growing up, people that I used to watch on TV. When we played Alabama, I mean, just seeing Nick Saban out there on the field was a crazy experience because, I mean, he's probably one of the greatest to do it all, if not the greatest in college. So just being able to play against the highest level of competition in college sports and experience something that not everybody's able to experience, as well as develop with my strength and my skills. It was super fun. I loved it. And it was a great experience.
You know how the coach meets at the center with the other coach and the quarterback meets with the other? Does the kicker meet the other kicker at the center?
Yeah, all the specialists kind of go off to the side a little bit and say what's up to each other because there's not as many specialists as other positions. So a lot of us know each other. A lot of us kicked against each other in high school and have grown up with each other. So seeing other kickers on other teams that you already know, just going up and chopping it up with them after, whether you win or lose, saying what's up. But we normally kind of convene off to the side more.
Now, would you let's say the Alabama guy kicked a 61-yarder, would you go up and congratulate him right away, almost like it's a fraternity, man, what a kick or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to give credit when credit is due. 61-yarder would be insane, but yeah, like I said, specialists themselves are kind of stick together, so it would definitely be all love if that happened.
Well, my hope is one day you play for either the Panthers or his team, the Dolphins. So that'd be awesome.
The goal.
All right, well, let's take a look at a couple of things here. I want to get your reaction on a couple articles out there. So let me go take a look at that real quick. First one is your UK profile, Jackson. So looking at you here, 5'10". Is that a pretty standard height for a kicker?
Yeah, that's pretty average. You don't want to be too tall as a kicker. I mean, a lot of kickers in the NFL are 5'7", 5'8", around that. But then you get to cases like Harrison Butker, who is really tall. He's probably 6'2", 6'3". But it's a pretty standard height.
So you played for Marvin Ridge High School here in the Charlotte area in Waxhaw. You were rated a 5-star kicker by several services in high school, so that's fantastic. I noticed that you got All-State honors, Special Teams Player of the Year in 21 and 22. So that's just huge that you were getting all those honors. Was that part of why you think you got noticed by some of the bigger schools?
Yeah, somewhat. With it being such like a local thing, it didn't really matter as much, but it definitely helped prove that I was as good as they thought I was.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What really amazed me about your profile is that you were a long jumper and you had a 4.3 grade point average, which means you're a really smart kid, of course. And then coming on down, you actually went to, was it the World Cup in soccer?
Yeah, I used to play for so I played soccer for like the DA, which is the Development Academy, or it's not that anymore, but it was the highest level at the time. And then I played futsal, um, I played futsal for the U.S. national team. So I
Oh,
was
so
able
it
to,
wasn't World Cup, it was U.S. national team at fifth and sixth grade. So it was like the kid in U.S. national team. Is that
yeah,
essentially what?
it was like a underage team. I went to Canada, Costa Rica, and Colombia. I played futsal in those countries. We kind of just went over there, played against their national teams as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that looks like a really cool sport. It's on the beach, right? Basically soccer on the beach.
Um, no, it's on a court, like a basketball court.
Oh, it's on a basketball court. Okay. Is it,
Well,
what is,
overseas, like it's native to South America, and
mhm.
over in South America they play on asphalt,
Oh,
like
okay.
concrete.
Gotcha.
So,
All right.
here in America we play it on like a basketball court, but over everywhere else, mostly it's played on asphalt or concrete.
And then you had used to race Bandolero cars at Charlotte Motor Speedway. What are Bandolero cars?
They're like I really have no clue how to explain it besides just a mini race car. You get in the top and everything. They go fast, but you race on a quarter-mile track instead of the whole big track.
Oh, gotcha. Very cool. I'll have to check that out. And then your last quote here was that you would have gone and played football sooner if you could have. So maybe quickly tell the story about how you came to football. I know you were a soccer player, and the guy basically told you you're our kicker.
Yeah, for sure. I was over at a friend's house for his birthday actually, over the summer. I I was gonna sleep over, and then they had like a strength and agility workout the next day, but it was ran through the football team,
Mm-hmm.
but it was for anybody that wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, just come. And I was like, oh, I don't like, I'm not really part of football, like kind of hesitant about it. And they're like, it, it's for everybody. Like you can come. And my dad was like, you should go. You know, it's strength and agility. It's not going to hurt anybody. You don't have to do anything football related. So I was like, okay, I'll go. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going. I had a blast. I was actually messing around after, and my friend was like, you should try kicking a football since he knew I played soccer.
Right.
So I was just messing around after, started kicking the football around, and the I was about to leave, and the coach came up to me and grabbed me. He's like, "Man, we need you as our kicker." And I was like, "No, no, I don't know football. I don't play football." He talked to my mom. My mom's like, we're not football people." Anyway, I was like, I have a busy schedule with soccer. I don't think I can do it. He was like, we'll work around it. We'll work around it. I ended up playing football for seventh grade was my first year. I
Mm-hmm.
would alternate days between going from football to soccer or soccer to football. So I'd either have to leave early or be late to practice. And
Wow.
they were very willing to work around that. After
Mm-hmm.
seventh grade year, I ended up quitting soccer because I just fell in love with football.
Oh,
Just
wow.
absolutely fell in love with it. So after one year of playing that, I completely dropped soccer.
How cool is that?
I still played futsal my eighth grade year. So for another year after I played soccer,
Mm-hmm.
but then after eighth grade, ended up dropping futsal as well completely and just focusing on football.
Very cool. Did they still call you J-Mo at Kentucky?
Yeah. Yes,
Did they?
sir.
So I've always wondered something. How much time do you spend on football plays, tackling, um, trick plays where you're throwing the ball, stuff like that? Like, is it just special days where you're working on trick plays, or how's that work?
Um, I may be the wrong person to ask for that because we're kind of off separately. We don't really learn as
You never
specialists. We
worked
don't.
with tackling?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, every once in a while we'll work on like fitting up somebody, but we never like actually go to the ground. They don't want to risk us getting injured. And for the,
Yeah.
But we work on in college. I mean, it really just depends from program to program. But I mean, fake plays are definitely worked on.
Okay.
Even on a daily basis.
Really?
There,
Oh, wow.
Where you're
yes,
throwing the
yeah.
ball and stuff like that?
There's a lot of things worked on. We work on as specialists. We work on a lot of holding. Even if you're not going to be the holder, work on a lot of holding. Work on a lot of things just to bring as much as you can to the table. You know,
Yeah.
onside kicks for the
Helps
very
it.
rare chance that you have to kick an onside kick. Work on onside kicks. We
Mhm.
work on just anything we can from a daily basis. From what I've experienced so far, I don't know. I haven't been a part of it, any other program yet, but um,
Well,
yeah,
Jackson,
we
we
work
want
on
to see you
everything.
throw. We want to see you throw a touchdown this year.
Oh yeah.
All right, so here's the big announcement. You made the transfer from Kentucky to Appalachian State. Finally committed this week. Tell us a little bit about kind of what that process was like. How do you get into the transfer portal? What are the logistics of it? And then how did you decide App State?
hmm So when you wanted to enter the transfer portal, um, technically you don't have to talk to your coaches, but it's very highly recommended because the football team is not what enters you in the portal. So how I did it was I talked to my academic advisor through football, who sent me to um, an academic center, and from there you go through paperwork. You have to watch like a video and all this about like what could happen if you don't get offers. What if you're a scholarship player that if you enter the portal, if you come back to your school, your scholarship doesn't have to be honored. Just a bunch of rules, a bunch of warnings, and from there on, you kind of sign the papers. If you're really sure you want to enter the portal, it could take up to 10 minutes, and you could be in. So
Is
It's
it
my
an actual?
understanding that
Is it an actual portal? Like, is it a website you go to, or?
isn't
yeah,
it
so
isn't it an athletic department person who has to put you in?
yeah, but they're like I don't know how to explain it. They're like the head over everybody instead of like they do every sport rather than just football.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I talked to my coaches, obviously, let them know what my intentions were. I talked to my academic advisor. Because at Kentucky we had an academic advisor through the school, and then also one through the football team. So I talked
Okay.
to my football team academic advisor.
Mhm.
They sent you to like the head of academics, like that is run through sports, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So like the head sports academic people are the people that put you in,
So,
and it's a very
so, on-
quick process. It's very quick if you decide.
so once you got in, after let's say however long it took for them to put you in, and you signed the papers, like how long do you wait before the people start contacting you, or do you actually try to actively contact schools? Like, what's the
Yeah.
process?
So for my case, well, as soon as you enter, it takes probably about 15-20 minutes to get up and approved and posted and all that. You can choose whether or not you like under your name it'll say contact or non-contact. So if you already know where you're gonna go, then a lot of people just put non-contact. But if you're going in with an open mind, you put contact. So coaches are in it a lot, just refreshing and looking at it. I entered actually the day it opened. So it was
And
it
it's
was
my
very
understanding
active.
it's open for 30 days in the spring. Is that right?
Yes, it was open. Yeah, from April. It was all of April. It was open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I know one right after the season's a little bit longer. I think it's 60 days.
Okay, so
But
30 days spring, 60 days at the end of the season.
I thought it was 15 days in the fall.
that's what it is. No,
Yeah.
it's 15 days now. It's 15 days in the spring.
Is that what
Okay,
it is?
Yeah.
okay.
and then I think it's 30 or 60 days in the fall.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, that's what it is, because it was from April 14th to the 30th or something like that. So it was 16 days or whatever it was.
It's supposed to be 15 and 30, I think. That's what I read.
So then going back to, do you need to go out and be proactive, or do you just wait for phone calls?
A little bit of both. From getting recruited, I reached out to the coaches that I already had in my contacts, had I already been talking to out of high school. But as well as, 45 minutes after I was in the portal, I had 10, 15 coaches texting me.
Really?
So you get a little bit of both. Actually, the two options that I narrowed it down to, I was not getting recruited to out of high school. So it was a whole new realm. Didn't know these people before. So kind of developed relationships from there on.
So your opportunities really did increase quite a bit from first year to second year.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I had more offers in the portal than I did coming out of high school.
Wow.
Yeah. I heard Deion in an interview, Deion Sanders, talk about how he feels sorry for high school kids because the amount of recruiting that goes on at that level is less than ever, because so much of the attention is turned toward the transfer portal.
For
and
sure.
So it's an interesting transition that we're in, where if you're on the bubble as a high school kid, you may not really get an opportunity. Whereas in the past, you probably would have found something. So I don't know. It's really interesting, I think.
Do you think, Jackson, that recruiting people in the portal and recruiting your own players is more important than recruiting high schoolers? Like, would you say that's true?
It depends on the program, because I know, like in Clemson's case, they won't even touch the portal. They like to get their high school guys. They like to develop. Clemson was actually the only college football program besides the military schools this year that did not take a single portal kid.
Right.
So it just depends on the program.
Dabo's had a lot of criticism because of that. I was just listening on sports radio this morning. They were tearing him apart that he's the only one who hadn't gotten people. Yeah.
I think it really just depends on the coaching and the program, because some programs want players to come in for a year, play for them a year, and then they'll worry about getting somebody like the next year. So if they want a really good quarterback, they'll get a really good quarterback for a year. And then if they need another quarterback, they'll get one next year, rather than getting maybe a younger player and developing them.
Yeah.
Like a high schooler. So it really just depends. Varies from program to program, coach to coach. But
gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, man, congratulations. We're going to have to come see a game this fall.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that the college sports is facing right now. And this first one I wanted to talk about is Florida State trustees sue the ACC for mismanaging media rights and imposing draconian exit fees. And as you might have heard, the ACC basically imposes a $140 million exit fee if you want to leave the ACC. It's really very large sum that most schools could not afford. So what Florida State's trying to do here, because the ACC's TV deal with ESPN is so low compared to some of the other leagues, is they're trying to get out of this contract essentially. And they've been joined by Clemson and Miami now. So there's 3 ACC schools that are trying to get out, and I'm having a feeling that UNC is probably going to follow. So,
yeah, I don't think UNC has a choice based on their financial situation. They're going to have to go for a bigger TV deal than what the ACC signed.
That's right. And so, what are you guys' thoughts about this lawsuit and what it's going to do to the overall landscape?
I think it'll be very interesting, especially seeing what happened to the Pac-12. How that whole entire conference has completely diminished at this point. So, I grew up with all the Power 5 conferences being how they were, all the same. There has been very little movement. I think Maryland used to be in the ACC, and then Notre Dame used to be in the ACC. But other than that, everything's kind of stayed the same. But now all these teams are moving to different conferences. I think it's kind of made it a little interesting. I don't know what will happen in the future, especially with the Pac-12, because now there's just 4 conferences. Um, so I'm not really sure how it will work or how it will
It's
do
interesting.
or
I would say that ESPN and ACC could maybe work out a deal, because ESPN is the one who holds the rights for a 10-year contract with the ACC that has completely gotten blown out of the market. So,
for sure.
but I would say maybe they would tear that contract up and renegotiate with ACC to try to save the ACC. But the problem with that is ESPN is actually going broke, and they've been
Yeah.
cutting staff and cutting programs, and they're talking about ABC is actually talking about selling ESPN to somebody if somebody will buy it. So I'm not sure ESPN is really in position right now to be forking out big dollars for a new
It
contract.
sounds like the solution is ESPN sells to somebody with deeper pockets. They
Right.
renegotiate the contract, and the ACC is fine again. So I
Right.
bet you that's what happens.
Likely. Yeah. I mean, my biggest concern being an ACC fan is that this is going to all come apart, and that, we're going to end up with 6 teams, kind of like the Pac-12, or 3 teams. So it will be really interesting to see what happens here. I don't think the ACC can hold on to these teams for much longer.
The biggest thing that damages a conference is the unknown, the chance that they might break up. They got to take that away. It's got to be, if they lock it in, I think ACC gets back on a healthy program of building, rivalries and all that stuff. But while people are teetering on going out of business or having huge deficits and suing the leagues and all that, they gotta put an end to this as quick as humanly possible.
That's right.
Because otherwise, all this unknown stuff, it's just like when a coach is threatening to retire every year, the 5-star recruit is not going to go to that school. They're going to go somewhere more solid, more stable.
My feeling is these schools are going to have to settle with the ACC. The ACC is going to have to let them go, unfortunately, and it's going to be for something less than 140 million. There'll be some kind of fee, but that's my feeling. And the ACC will have to replace them with some other teams. That's just what I'm predicting at this point. So next article, I wanted to show you guys this one. This is the big one. This lawsuit brought by several attorney generals, including the state of Virginia, is against the NCAA, and it's essentially a $20 billion request for back damages for players from 2010 to 2021. And it would compensate those players for the inability to use their name, image, and likeness, or their NIL ability. Of course, $20 billion would bankrupt the NCAA, and a couple of $1 billion would probably bankrupt the NCAA. They don't have that kind of money. So this is a huge deal. This is going to court in January. So luckily it'll be after this next football season. But the amount of uncertainty we're going to see in the NCAA next spring is going to be pretty unprecedented. I think we're going to be seeing this on TV a lot. And I'm just not sure what the path forward is going to be for the NCAA. What do you guys think?
I'm really not too sure. I think it's too early to tell. It's pretty 50-50 chance right now, but I mean, I hope for at least fans in my case that everything works out fine. But I mean, there definitely could be a huge change in college sports if the contrary happens.
Absolutely. I think this is another lawsuit that has to settle. NCAA is going to have to settle for some smaller amount than 20 billion to be able to survive. And then the real thing that's going to come out of this, and I think you would agree, Rob, is a go forward plan for pay to play, right? Some kind of plan where whether each school gets to have a salary cap of $20 million or whatever the settlement is, there's going to be some pay to play plan in place for at least the major conferences coming out of this lawsuit. Any thoughts?
Not really. I think it's in the air. I think there's a pretty tremendous question mark around this suit, which direction it could go. I think it could potentially wipe out the NCAA if they start losing these kind of things and they're not able to negotiate and settle. And then NCAA would get replaced with something else. I always think, if something is good, a product is good, a company will go out of business, but they'll get bought out. The good parts will get bought out, and then you get into a healthier situation. So I think these bad TV contracts put us in a bad spot, and now they have to renegotiate and get onto a better footing. And then the bombarding of all these lawsuits is making things worse. I just think all these things will get worked out. But I cannot predict how. Like, I'm not going to sit here and try and figure out what the results are all going to be. But I think at the end of the day, within 5 years, we're going to be in an okay spot.
You might have a situation here because this lawsuit's being brought under antitrust. You may have a situation where the NCAA sees the writing on the wall and ends up having to break itself up into pieces so that there isn't the antitrust problems in the future. So you might see football spin off, you might see basketball spin off into its own governing body. And, there may be one way to try to have a path for the future.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of thoughts about how the different D1, D2, D3 are going to separate into conferences, and they're all going to have different rules, and it's not going to be one NCAA anymore. So that wouldn't be the end of the world. It would work out, and everyone would copy each other for good ideas. So it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. It would just be different. And so, I think it's the kind of thing where you move forward and you keep changing and you keep as much positive as you can. And you take all the good college sports forward and all the business side of it changes and you end up okay.
Yeah, agreed. Last one I wanted to show you guys is this one right here. This just came out this week. UNC Board of Trustees to audit their athletic department. Their athletic department has been coming in pretty regularly with shortfalls. This year, they came in with a $7 million shortfall. Next year, they're looking at a $17 million shortfall. And their curve is showing a potentially $100 million deficit in the next couple of years. And so you're going to have this situation where this school that has the best brand in sports, UNC Tar Heels, are in this kind of deficit. You can't tell me there's not other schools that are going to have the same kind of thing. So unfortunately, you've got a situation where pay to play is coming. And you're going to have probably a $20 million salary cap or whatever it's going to be. And it's going to hit these schools that are already in deficit situations. So what are you guys' thoughts about how are these schools going to figure out a way to survive?
I think a lot of support from maybe donors and alumni, the support from the fans, the fan base. I know for at least at Kentucky, there's no professional sports in the state of Kentucky. So all the support goes to you either pick a side, Louisville or Kentucky. So I feel like a lot of people will see that and maybe support that as well and help their school, their alma mater out. I feel like they can also, some schools will be able to scrape up some money that that maybe they're putting off, but I think most schools will be able to survive.
Yeah, you're right. You'll have boosters, you'll have fans, you'll have ticket prices increasing. You'll have, I know Rob works at NC State. NC State last year, or was it a couple of years ago, Rob, went to serving beer at games, whereas before they didn't, because beer is a revenue producer.
We were the first. We were one of the first in the country. Texas went first, and then some other schools went, but we were definitely one of the first on the East Coast, if not the first. And what a lot of schools said is, no way, we're not serving beer, and we're not going to do things like that. And what they've come to realize is that the data supports many fewer alcohol incidents, because there's a lot less chugging alcohol in the parking lot and then running in and just being hammered and falling down. And by the third quarter, there's a lot more. I'm going to drink a $15 beer maybe twice during the game, maybe 3 times, and everyone leaves kind of under control. There's a lot better behavior than there was in the past. NC State's pretty well known for its tailgating. Things have tempered a bit. And so a lot of schools who swore up and down they'd never do beer realize, hey, there's a huge amount of revenue there, and it actually limits our problems instead of exacerbating them. A lot of people assume that there would be a lot more alcohol incidents. the statistics at Texas let NC State know that actually they go down. And then there've been a lot of evidence since then. So alcohol is just one of the pieces that they've come to realize, that the less hammered your stadium is, the more of a pleasant experience it is, the more likely you are to go take your kids and buy a ticket. So there's a whole lot of things like that going on where people are getting creative, and serving beer in your stadium actually could present a gap filler for some of those shortfalls.
Right.
I do feel sorry for a lot of these athletic directors, because they're getting hit with all these demands from student athletes to pay them and form NIL deals. A lot of money is no longer flowing from the rich alumni into the athletic program and then disseminating down through really, really nice hot tubs and locker room amenities and things that affect the athlete directly. Instead, they go around the athletic program straight into the pockets of the student, which again, I'm for, but it does put the athletic department in a bit of a pinch. And I think that's what's been happening in North Carolina.
Not only that,
bringing in less than you would expect, and the billionaires are still giving all their money. So it's just tricky. I think while there are no limits on NIL, I think while there are relatively few limits on transferring and NIL and all that stuff, I think athletic departments are really feeling the pinch. I think they'll come back stronger as these things get kind of worked out and organized.
They'll figure it out. I will say though, if you think about it, if you're an athletic department, you're going to have to increase your staff a lot, because if you're going to be facilitating NIL deals and doing recruiting and running the program and running the facilities and doing pay to play, I mean, there's no way your current staff's going to be able to handle all that, right? So some of these deficit situations may, at least in the short term, be even worse for these schools, as they have to hire, an NIL specialist, a pay to play specialist, and have to hire staff that they might not have needed before. So that'll be interesting.
There's one more factor that's really hurting the athletic departments. I was listening to the ACC basketball meeting that they just had, and they had from their UC Berkeley coach, and I think the guy from TCU was there, all these new members of the ACC. And I realized, man, it's going to be a lot more expensive sending women's softball out to go play UC Berkeley on a Tuesday and then come back. That's a flight, that's a hotel room, that's, so we're adding millions of dollars to all these different programs just to play their regular schedule, as opposed to, used to be back in the day, you jump on a bus, go to Clemson, come back, jump on a bus, go to UNC or Duke, or everything was a drivable little conference. And then as it expanded along the East Coast, it got more expensive. And now it's really expensive to fly everybody to all these different places. So
my first thought when we added Stanford and Berkeley and SMU to the ACC,
SMU, sorry, not TCU,
was those guys are going to have to fly, and basically every game they're going to fly to the East Coast. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, let's take a look at this slideshow I put together here. This is episode 15 for the Sports Guyz, pay to play, NIL, and transfer portal, what the impact is on college sports. You can see some of the major players that are going to help decide this whole settling out of college sports situation. All these guys on the left side there have an impact in the decisions. One's the Department of Labor. They're going to come down with a heavy hand and make sure that if we're going to start treating college athletes as employees, which it sounds like we are, then a whole bunch of new laws and rules are going to come in, including Title IX is one of those rules.
And are they employees? So when they receive a scholarship, that now has monetary value that they have to pay tax on.
That's right.
Right.
That's
so
exactly.
It gets really complicated.
Yeah. So then you have the College Athletes Players Association, CAPA, which always, since it's been formed for a long time, has had very little power and has had very little kind of impact on college sports. But the feeling is that they're going to start becoming much more of a player and much more powerful, because they're probably going to be doing things like collective bargaining of college athletes with the schools. So you could see this CAPA organization becoming a much bigger factor. You have the NCAA Division One group there on the left. Division One, of course, is going to have most of the power in football because they've got all the big conferences. You have the Olympics organization. The reason that they're involved here is they went through this exact process over 2 decades ago when there was a debate happening over whether we should allow professional athletes play in the Olympics or not. And that decision got forced by, at that time, the Dream Team, which was the U.S. basketball team, because they wanted Michael Jordan and those guys to play. So eventually, Olympics went ahead and buckled and allowed in pro athletes into the Olympics. So they're going to be a big part of the discussion. Then you got the college football playoff and March Madness, which are the two, Mac daddies of what's going forward, especially with the college football playoff now expanding to 12 teams. Let's take a look at what we got here. First one's these are the pay-to-play rules. February 2024, federal judge ruled the NCAA must allow players and NIL boosters to negotiate NIL deals before a player commits. So that was a big change. Before that, the player had to basically commit before they would get an NIL deal package in place. The ruling could contribute to the death of amateurism, which is already on life support. And then I mentioned the class action lawsuit, the $20 billion that is going to court in January of 2025, unless the NCAA can settle that lawsuit, which they're trying very hard to do right now. Any thoughts about these?
Just that it's a brave new world.
Yeah. I think it makes it fair, somewhat, for all athletes to be able to have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see why you would say that. I mean, there's definitely an argument to that case that really they've been employees all along. They just haven't been compensated. So
there's no doubt that a better system awaits us. The question is, should it be the Wild West, or should there be some rules that make it a little more fair? Because otherwise small schools might just go under or get rid of their programs.
Well, that's what will happen. A lot of the small schools will just get rid of football.
We don't want that either. So we got to find some kind of balance. We don't want just 10 good teams and everything else goes away, because that could very well happen.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We want the lower schools in the SEC and ACC and Big Ten and all that to exist and to thrive and to let people have a shot. If you look at the NFL rosters, they're made up of everywhere. Division II,
yeah, but only, like Jackson said earlier, and it was a really good point, only 2% of college athletes go on to play professional.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
That means 98% go on to just regular life. And the question is, do you want to give those 98% an opportunity? And that's what Jackson's arguing here, and I agree with him.
Yeah, I agree.
They should be able to make some money in college because a lot of them will never go pro.
I love the idea of a student who's a good player in college but probably not going to make it, having the ability to make a little chunk of money that they can do for a down payment on a house. To me, that is so exciting, that they get to launch into the next chapter with a little bit of an advantage. For all the sacrificing they've done, they deserve that. So, that's, to me, that's a no-brainer. The question is, should there be rules about it more clear than what they are today? And I think that is where I feel like, yes, there should be a little bit more regulation, but not too much so that students can be advantaged by it. Athletic programs can get to a healthier place financially. You can work out what it's like to fly your wrestling team to another coast just for a regular game or match, and not go under as a program. Because football is not the only concern here. A lot of these sports don't make money; they lose money, and football pays for them. And so,
Agreed. So pay-to-play fallout ruling will have other consequences. Athletic departments can now facilitate NIL deals as of 2024, which is a huge change from 3 years ago when NIL started. Essentially, teams can have, or programs can have, NIL coordinators to help players, arrange for, the commercial with a local car dealership or whoever it is. So that's going to be a big change, and I'm not sure what impact that's going to have. Hopefully, it'll be better for the player, I would think. Also, media companies can offer players NIL deals as a share of revenue. The NCAA also is barred from enforcing its rule of restitution. So, in other words, if any of the players' lawsuits that are happening right now get overturned in any way, the NCAA can't come back on them later on. And some of the effects of the rulings that will happen next year will be tested for the first time in the transfer portal that we're in right now in the spring of 2024. What are your thoughts, Jackson, about making NIL easier and allowing schools to facilitate it and those kinds of things?
I think it could honestly help it because being young and coming right out of high school, especially because I had an NIL deal at Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
didn't really understand all that aspect. So a company could write you a contract and you could sign your name and you could sign something that you have no idea what you're getting yourself in for.
Right.
So having the schools and having the NCAA to be able to regulate that and review that now kind of helps the younger athletes, the younger people that are still new to all this, be able to maybe not get into something that they will regret in the long run. Because some companies may try to sneak in something that you don't read or so. I know there's a lot of people
that's a really good perspective, Jackson. I hadn't thought of. The schools can act as kind of like a semi-agent for players who can't have an agent, right?
Mhm.
And make sure that they're looking out for your better interests and that you're not being asked to do something by the company that maybe you didn't want to do or something like that.
For sure.
Really
And sorry, NIL deals and NIL money in general is you have to pay taxes on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that, and there's been cases where kids get NIL money and blow through it, and then it comes around, they have to pay taxes, and they already spent all the money.
I got
So
it.
that's another thing that they try to teach us and try to regulate. So they kind of have us, if you do get like a big deal, kind of set aside money for taxes or whatever, and so you don't blow through that and end up in a bad situation.
So, how did the NIL deal for you work? Did you have to sign a contract? Was it for a specific period of time?
Yeah, so I actually got a call one morning through one of the people that worked at Kentucky for the football team, do like
Mhm.
they just were like a player personnel kind of person. And they're like, "Would you be interested in doing an NIL deal?" I was like, "Yes, of course." It was some company called Visit Lex, which is like Lexington's. I don't know how to explain it. Like where
It's like
people can go and like, yeah, like a tourism website where people can book things as well as where people go to like just see Lexington and where it promotes Lexington. And they were we did a deal with a local farm. There was a kid on our team named Kenneth Horsey.
Mhm.
So and my last name being Moore, the whole idea behind the campaign was More Horsey. So
I got you.
we went and took pictures with the horse. Before that, I had to sign a contract. The contract was very straightforward. It wasn't too in detail. In my case, you also have to get the contract approved first
Mhm.
before you can do it. So um,
Mhm.
got it signed. They tell you how they're gonna pay you. They tell you how much they're gonna pay you. All that stuff.
Mhm.
I did that. Did the deal. It was like an hour and a half of taking pictures and a little video with some horses, and
Mhm.
boom, that they paid me when they were supposed to pay me, and they stuck to their word. We stuck to ours, and
That's
um,
great.
it was awesome.
Yeah.
And as well as we did the NIL deal with Visit Lex, but it ended up going beyond that.
Mhm.
The deal was posted all over ESPN as well as like other media websites. So not only did I get publicity from Visit Lex, but also it was able to build my brand and my name a little bit on a national stage such as ESPN.
Yeah. Yeah. Man,
That's
that's
so
awesome. That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear it's working that way. That gives me a lot of
yeah.
hope that maybe we will have a go forward that really works for everybody and gives players an opportunity. That's
I
great.
think there's a lot of positives that are coming out of this. And I like hearing the anecdotes of it. I've seen a bunch. Believe me, the NC State basketball team became heroes around here when they made it to the Final Four this year. And all of a sudden on the radio, I'm hearing several of the players, DJ Burns and DJ Moore, were at a local Chili's or something like that, signing autographs. And it ended up being something like 5,000 people lined up waiting to meet him.
Wow.
It was just, it was, police had to be brought in because it was so out of control. Everyone was behaving, but it was so big that they didn't plan on. They couldn't believe it. So it's so exciting to see college kids do something special and then get rewarded for it. There's something that doesn't sit right with me with transferring to get more money. I'm not sure why that bothers me a little bit, but to watch kids on campus happy with the school, doing their best, doing something special and getting rewarded is so great that I don't know that you can legislate the other out, but
I agree. So what are NIL deals? They're agreements in which college athletes are compensated for the use of their name, image, or likeness. So historically, NCAA has had very strict rules barring college athletes from profiting off their name, image, and likeness while they're eligible to compete. But in recent years, starting in 2021, NIL rules have changed and loosened up, and now they've given athletes the ability to earn additional income. And you just heard Jackson's testimony on one of his NIL deals. Typically, NIL deals have not been facilitated by schools, but now they are getting facilitated by schools. And again, Jackson, you just confirmed that with the call from the school. Would you be interested in doing this deal? Any thoughts about where you think this is going from an NIL perspective?
I think it's definitely got a positive trend to it. I mean, for somebody that I was a freshman, I wasn't the star player of the team. I wasn't even the starter of the team. So for somebody like me that isn't really getting their name out too much, just having an opportunity like that to be able to get my name out and be able to connect with people, because now I have contacts to businesses and everything for future. So just giving the opportunity for kids that, like I said, don't have the biggest name right now, giving them an opportunity, I think has really opened up a lot of doors.
So would you agree that for 99% of the athletes, this system is going to work and it's going to get better and it's going to be positive? I think my concern is for the very small number of folks like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Caleb Williams, these guys who essentially took a pay cut by going to the NFL, because like Marvin Harrison was offered something like $15 million to stay at Ohio State for another year. So my question is should there be some limits on the top end of some of these deals so that it doesn't get so out of whack? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, no matter what happens, there's always going to be some sort of those kind of problems. A lot of people are money hungry nowadays. So, I mean, in this day and age, I think no matter what kind of rules play into place, they're going to find a way to beat around the bush to get more money, keep the players around. But like we mentioned before, I think there are so many goods with this that like they definitely do outweigh the bad. But any rule that gets put into place, I feel like there's going to be something that happens that is going to be able to somehow like dodge the rule, kind of get around it a little bit.
Sounds good. Well, I think it's like you said, I think it's heading in a positive direction, and I'm hopeful that they'll find some at least reasonable rules around some of this.
And let's also remember, back in the day, it wasn't exactly super fair. I mean, I'm not going to name universities, but I had friends who played D1, huge football program, that used to receive envelopes of money every single home game, and so did their mom. And I know for a fact that as a Virginia fan, our team wasn't doing that. And so how do you compete when these guys are going up, against, but he said that the problem was staying a starter because only the starters got paid. And then he'd look over and there was 4 5-star All-Americans underneath him as underclassmen working out next to him. he felt he had to do more reps because they were catching him. So there was just, it wasn't perfect back then either. There were issues from school to school on how much they adhered to the rules. So I don't think you'll ever have 100%, but I think if you can set some kind of standard that most schools follow, especially the really the ones that believe in setting up these students for their future, whether it's academically or athletically, either way they're fine. The good academic institutions and the ones that really are all about the well-being of the student's future. Then I think then the outliers won't matter that much.
Makes sense. So some other new rules coming for NIL this year, starting August 1st. So basically end of the summer, there will be new rules allowing athletes to pursue NIL opportunities without limitations imposed by the NCAA. And essentially, the reason they're putting that in place is the NCAA sees the writing on the wall that if they try to impose any limits on what you can be compensated, they're going to get sued by athletes. So, my hopes for reasonable caps, I think, is probably unrealistic. It seems like if you can get the money and you can get the NIL deal, then go for it. That's what it seems like to me. Any thoughts here?
It is possible that they end up with some kind of cap on the university, and it's
Right.
probably a big number. And so you ask yourself, is this one player worth a third of my cap money for the whole school? Probably not. Let's knock that down a little. Or they can work out something, I think.
No, I think the cap will come in, but it'll come in for pay to play. It's not going to come in for NIL. That's just my feeling on it.
Probably right.
Pay to play is something the schools control. NIL is something that's outside the schools. As a matter of fact, you see there in the second paragraph that NIL deals must be independent and not tied to enrollment, performance, or team membership. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think that these are going to be really hard to control.
It is interesting to watch Texas with Arch Manning. He's not even a starter, and he's getting compensated like that, like in a huge way. I wonder if future companies are watching that, saying, "Let's make sure they're starters first, or to do the big money." I'm talking, whatever he makes, $5 million a year, 10. Let's go for the smaller deals, maybe if they're not really a starter yet. I don't know. I don't really know how it's all going to play out.
Caleb Williams made $5 million last year. This year he's going to make 2.4. So yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right as far as.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do about it, but it seems crazy.
It does. So transfer portal rules, new transfer portal as of April 2024. This is, Jackson, what you just went through. That allows all undergraduate athletes to transfer and play immediately. So there's no penalty. There's no year sitting out. If you meet specific academic requirements, as the Division I Council on Wednesday approved emergency legislation. So what are your thoughts here, Jackson, about letting athletes transfer essentially whenever they want within whatever window they want and play immediately?
Yeah, so if this is not an NCAA rule, but this is an SEC rule. If you transfer in the spring window, I don't know how it is for other sports, but for football specifically, if you transfer in the spring window, you cannot transfer to another SEC school without sitting a year.
I see. Okay.
So
yeah, I read some research. I'm not sure how up to date it was, but it said that you're allowed to transfer one time, and then the second time you have to wait a year, or there have to be two stipulations. One is medical and one is hardship. Those are the only restrictions. Is that still correct?
I'm not 100% sure. I know there used to be a rule where you couldn't transfer twice, but I'm pretty sure now you can only transfer twice, and the third time, that may be it now.
Okay. I know there's some restrictions. It's not completely open.
Yeah.
Because this legislation I was reading, it says here, legislation will not limit the number of times an athlete can transfer. And there are still two transfer windows, but they cannot transfer mid-year and play for a second school in the same season. Mm-hmm. That's like the only limitation. Like you can't transfer, and play football for two different schools in the same football season.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually found that out recently. I found that out recently that you couldn't transfer SEC to SEC. But I mean, it makes sense. They don't want a player going through the spring program. You have to enter the portal before the spring. But if you go through the spring program, you have to go to a different conference. I mean, you could go to SEC, but you'd have to sit a year. But I also know that as a PWO, you can enter the portal kind of whenever.
Okay.
As a scholarship player, you have to wait till the window, but as a PWO or as a a true walk on, you're allowed to enter the portal at any point.
That
So
makes sense.
Now you couldn't be picked up or and you couldn't move in or anything until the opening, but you are
Yeah.
allowed to enter.
Mhm.
Jackson, if you were to design the system, what would you keep it like it is? Is there anything that you would change having just gone through it? Is there anything that you would
Yeah.
like to add?
I think everything's fair. I think so. The good news is the portal window. 15 days seems like a little time, but it's only 15 days to enter your name. Because originally that's where a lot of people get mixed up is, oh, you only have 15 days to get recruited, and you only have 15 days to talk to coaches and commit. You actually technically have all the way. Well, for the spring, you have all the way till July 31st before you have to commit. So, the 15 days is just to enter your name, which is where a lot of people get mixed up. So I think there's plenty of time in that aspect. I think that the way that they do it right now is pretty close to perfect. There's very few problems that I don't really hear people complaining about problems with the portal besides just the portal itself. But I think how the portal is designed and how it's ran um, has definitely come to agreement with the athletes, coaches, everything all in one. I feel like it's definitely in a good place.
It sounds like they've been able, because all this stuff is pretty new, and it sounds like the schools have been able to fairly quickly adapt to all these new things coming at them. It sounds like the portal's working okay, NIL's working okay. There are some regulations. You still have to sign a contract. The pay to play thing, of course, is still the newest of all of them, and it hasn't really come yet. But it does sound like you're right, Jackson, that a lot of that's running pretty smoothly right now.
Yeah,
I do think there could be some problems. I think schools contacting players who aren't in the portal, trying to talk them into it, could go on behind closed doors. There could be some shadiness with NIL deals that don't end up being the best for the student. I also think back to Virginia when we had a basketball player who got redshirted, and he really didn't want to. And I know you have to redshirt yourself, but he got a lot of pressure from the coaches to redshirt, and he was very upset. His name was DeAndre Hunter, and I think if he came along today, he would have transferred. Like that's how upset he was. And but he stuck it out, and he ended up becoming Virginia's best player, and they went on to win the national title. And he was a huge part of why they won the national title. And now he's a big time NBA player, very successful. And a lot of that is because of that platform of fighting through that adversity. And I don't think he'd be in the same position if he had not stuck it out and all that. So part of me sides with the students' well-being in terms of go get a better situation. You're not meshing with the coach. And part of me is saying some of that coaching is actually better for the player in the long run.
And
so
actually,
I don't know how you work all that out.
It's interesting you say that, because the old school part of me, Jackson, makes me think to myself that, is this really teaching young kids the right message? Like if it gets a little bit hard, I'm going to just transfer. That's the easy way to go. What's the lesson that you're learning there? So that's the old school part of me. The new school part of me is saying that this is inevitable. This is evolution. This is better for the students. They're getting a better opportunity. They're going to start getting compensated. They can make sure they get to the school that is right for them. So I agree. I'm kind of torn on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I definitely agree both ways. I mean, I'm definitely haven't been too fond of the portal like coming out of high school, because it definitely has hurt a lot of high school recruiting. And then even using it, I mean, I didn't really want to, but for my career, I felt like it was the best way to go. But I know I definitely agree. There's some people that, come into a school and they get petty because maybe they don't get the playing time or the treatment they want, and so they're like,
Mhm.
I'll just go to another school.
Mhm.
So I mean, I definitely agree with that on that aspect that people may quit or give up easier when they have a alternate route.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
But there are also the case that people use it to better their careers, and you
Sure.
see a lot of these people
No
that
question.
they like Joe Burrow from Ohio State transferred over
Exactly.
to LSU, and I mean that was probably the best decision he could have ever made.
Yeah.
That's right.
Tom
So
and I talked about that. Putting this together, he was my example. Was Joe Burrow was a positive example of he was
mhm,
not getting his opportunities,
Right.
and for him to transfer and then put on the greatest, performance of a season and a championship ever by a college quarterback
yeah,
surely shows what
Mhm.
can happen if you give someone opportunity. I
I mean,
think transferring for opportunity is the best possible reason. What I'm afraid of is the kid who's being lazy in practice or showing up late and not following rules.
mhm.
That's not the same as I'm doing everything I'm asked of, and I'm competing against somebody exactly as good as me or maybe a little better. And if I
mhm,
just
Mhm.
went to another team, I'd have a different opportunity. That kid should transfer. You know what I mean? Like in
I
your
mean,
case,
Caleb Williams did the same thing. Jaden Daniels did the same thing.
yeah,
All these guys, went and got a better opportunity. So
yeah.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
But it's not that they were shying away from hard coaching or being lazy. They're like, let me go harder.
mhm.
Like just give me a
Yeah,
chance.
and I think maybe the kids that do shy away, um, even if they do go in the portal and get picked up at another school, if their habits don't change, then they're going to end up right in the same exact situation. So, um, also going in the portal can be scary because you're not guaranteed anything.
Yeah,
So,
That's true.
you lose your
you really,
scholarship.
yeah, you really have to sit down and think. There is a possibility that I never play the sport ever again if I enter the portal.
Right.
Yeah,
That's very true.
Because
That's true.
schools are not required to take you back. Also, you're not guaranteed anything in the portal. So, it's definitely a decision that you just don't want to just be like, oh, a coach yelled at me one day, I'm getting in the portal.
yeah,
Right. Mhm.
So I feel like that aspect is kind of limited, maybe the people entering just because of it.
So your decision was purely on playing time, correct? For the most part.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, I was the backup at Kentucky. I loved it there. I didn't want to leave. I love the area, love the people, love the coaches, love the school. It just happened to not work out, and for me to be able to, I feel like I personally have a lot more potential that I could reach, and
Mhm.
I never want to. I never. It was awesome to be part of an SEC program. I
Mhm.
could have stayed there my whole entire career and been fine, but you know. I don't want to look back and regret anything
Mhm.
when I know that, and I feel like that I have a lot more that I could do with my talents and my career. And
Okay.
ultimately, the goal is the NFL and going to App State and getting an amazing opportunity. And
Yeah.
where kickers are like pitchers in baseball, it doesn't really matter where you're playing. I mean,
That's
Justin
true.
Tucker was at a D2 school, and
Yep.
he's the greatest to do it right now. So, I mean, just
Yep.
opportunity to purely play and show my talents and to have that even chance and that little nudge to go to the next level.
That makes
I
sense.
think I think your example is exactly why the transfer portal is a really good idea. And then there are some outlier situations that are not as good, but that's really exciting. I think you made a
Okay.
really good call, and you can say positive things about Kentucky and say, let's go with this new chapter. That's
Exactly.
For
really,
sure.
Yep.
really cool.
And it's
So
been nothing but support from everybody. I mean, Kentucky
yeah.
coaches, Kentucky fans, same with App State coaches, App State fans. Like it's been nothing but support on both sides because um, nowadays, I mean, a lot of the fans and a lot of the coaches just they want to see you succeed, and that I feel like that's how it should be. There's that
I
very
have
rare case that
Yeah,
come across people that don't, but they really just want what's best for the athlete and what's best for your career. And um, I guess if you leave on a good note, it's a little better than if you leave on a bad note. But Ultimately, wherever you go, people are going to support you, or what I've experienced, people support you, especially in the portal, even if
I
they
have
don't
no doubt.
agree with it.
I have no doubt you're such a great kid that the fans of Kentucky are going to be rooting for you. They're going to be excited every time you make a field goal, and coaches are going to be the same way. So
Yeah.
all of us will be rooting for you. Let's talk about spring football rules. 18 spring training days allowed within a 34 calendar day period in the spring. What are your thoughts about that? Is that enough? Is that too much? Was spring football like worth it? You think it's a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's plenty. I mean, we ended up doing 2 spring practices after the spring game because we did 16 before the spring game and then
Okay.
had 2 more. Um, you're not required to use all the practices, so if it is too much, you're not required. But or actually, I'm not too sure about that.
Do they play like a full game? I mean, is it truly like the ones versus the twos, and everyone's in pads, and you play
It
real crunch?
varies. It
Okay,
varies from school to school. There's not a dead set how the spring game has to look.
okay,
So it just kind of just depends. I mean, you guys, I don't know if you saw, but Ole Miss did like a whole like dunk contest and eating contest, so it kind of made it fun for the fans, fun for everybody.
gotcha.
But then
Yeah.
you see like I know when I was getting recruited, I went to the Florida spring game. They do like a full 4 quarter game almost.
Hmm.
But we did like a modified, like I'd say it was. I mean, everybody got reps, threes, fours, whoever.
Yeah.
But
Oh, good.
I think the spring practice is good because it kind of keeps you sharp. You kind of get to learn the plays. The 18 practices,
Hmm.
honestly, they fly. I don't think it's too much at all. Um, but I feel like it's a good opportunity to
Okay.
also prove yourself because you may not do as much on field work during the summer.
Hmm.
So going into fall camp, I feel like spring is really your time to prove yourself, maybe for even fall
Yeah.
camp.
Mhm.
So if you're a two or a three, you get some playing time in the spring. You get some playing time in the spring game. That's kind of your opportunity, right?
For sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I can
Makes
imagine
sense.
if you're like a third string quarterback, it would be so crucial to learning the
Mm.
playbook and to like figuring out, the cadence and
Hmm.
just such a complicated position. That's probably not even enough practice for them.
And did they have
Yeah.
you kicking? Did they have you kicking for the white team and the other kicking for the blue team, or something like that?
So actually, the kickers kind of just we did offense for like we never really had like we didn't split the team we did offense versus defense. So we didn't split our team into 2 separate
Understood.
teams.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
So kickers just run the offense and we rotated in. So the starter got the first field goal and extra point, and then it rotated.
Gotcha.
So we ended up all getting. So the starter got a field goal and extra point, and then um, me and the other kicker we were able to get an extra point. So
Gotcha.
they gave us all opportunity to kick, and um, but a lot of schools do 2 separate teams, and the starters one team and the backups the other team usually.
Another interesting rule here I thought was football players not allowed to compete or participate in more than 90 minutes of full contact practice per week. So that's for the whole week, 90 minutes of full contact. So what's that all
Yes.
about? Just trying to
So
avoid injury?
yeah, I think a big part of it's injury.
Hmm.
I don't experience it a lot being a kicker because we kind of do our own thing, kind of
Yeah.
just kick off to the side. We don't do any sort of contact. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I mean, for O lineman's case, instead of beating each other in the head 4 5 days a week, they're doing it only one, and I think definitely limits injuries, limits long-term injuries as well as
Hmm.
short-term.
Hmm.
Um, but
Have
I
you ever
mean,
have you ever had a chance at an onside kick that you recovered? You ever had that?
I actually have in high school. I played an
Oh, really?
all-star game and I did like a
Okay.
little like fake kickoff where I did my full steps and I little dribbled it down the middle and dove on it.
Sweet.
Um,
That must have
but
been fun.
I dove on it right away because I was not trying. I'm
Yeah.
not. I mean, I'm not the biggest kid, so it's usually how it is for kickers. So he's gotta
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
out of the way.
All right, well, let's look at some of the open questions for NCAA, and then we'll wrap it up. So the first one is, should there be a salary cap in football and maybe in basketball? What do you guys think? Again, this is when we get to pay to play.
I'm not too sure. I don't really know how I feel about that quite yet. I feel like it could go kind of either way, and I feel like maybe a salary cap would help, but also hurt, and then not have a salary cap would help and hurt. So I feel like there's a bunch of pros and cons for both sides. So I don't really have a strict opinion on that.
I think from the fans' perspective, who likes to see upsets and likes to see parity and likes to see balance, salary cap would be necessary, because the only way you're going to have, a situation where only 6 teams dominate every single year versus real parity is if you have a salary cap. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Robbie?
I do think if you have a salary cap of some kind, it'll prevent teams from throwing a ridiculous amount of money at one player to bring him to your program.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to spread it out over a certain number of players, I don't know. I think it's just really up in the air. They got to work all this stuff out. There's so many moving parts to this that I don't know how it's all going to fit together. My tendency is to say there have to be some parameters here. I'd like to see a lot of that money spread around more players. And I think that would be more useful if you have a salary cap. I think it would go to more players. I don't think you're going to pay your quarterback half your entire stash.
Sports budget.
Your budget. But right now, I think there's so much pressure that they'll make that mistake. And then you have players that aren't stars missing out on deals because they had to lump together every single thing they had to get this one guy.
Well, you get a Caleb Williams in your program, you're going to have to pay him 25% of your salary cap. So
yeah, I think that'll limit some of that, and you'll have it spread around more of your program, not just football players, but and then also there'll be a little bit more competitiveness among schools, instead of the haves and the have-nots, which I think you'll always have haves and have-nots. But I think if you have some limitations, like unlimited free agency and unlimited amount of money a player can make, sounds to me like it's going to hurt programs if you allow that.
So number 2 is, should players have to sign a contract, maybe at least 2 years? So if we're going to go to pay to play and we're going to professionalize college athletics, should players have to sign a contract like a professional would?
Coming from an athlete, I personally wouldn't want to do that.
Okay.
Just because I feel like for the rare case that like what happens like with the transfer portal and all that, like then you're kind of stuck there, and I feel like that could hurt your career a lot.
Okay.
Because if you come in as a young guy out of high school and you're promised a lot of things and something happens and that may not be true, or something happens with your performance, you're not performing how you were supposed to. I feel like if you're buying into that contract, it could hurt your career, because if you wanted to transfer in for a better opportunity, you couldn't.
So you like the situation where every year the football, basketball, all the teams have to relook at their rosters top to bottom and potentially could be losing and gaining people. You like that situation? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's better for the athlete and not as good for the fans, because you might have
or the coaches
all this changeover of players constantly, and you never. What I remember was so cool going to school was having sort of these heroes of yours that you were actually in class with rising to the level of 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year senior, and you really looked up to them, and they weren't just gone the next year. They were, I don't know how to describe it, but it was really cool to be able to see them in place for a while. And I think
follow their journey.
You follow their journey and you stay with them, and you build this allegiance to them. It was so easy to, I think they sold more jerseys back then because there was more people who knew who Herman Moore was, you know.
And it's not just that. You have fans don't know who's on their team every year. You know, like you have a situation where they used to keep a player for 4 or 5 years. You knew exactly what your roster looked like coming back. And now your roster is completely different every year.
So that's what I'm saying is it might be the advantage for the player and at the detriment of the fan. So I think there's still work to be done on finding that common ground so that everybody finds a win. Maybe after your first transfer, there starts to be rules, maybe.
And there's a third party you haven't talked about, and that's the coaches, right? So you mentioned Jackson. Dabo Sweeney doesn't like to play in the portal. What he likes to do is recruit a guy and keep him for 4 or 5 years and develop him and bring him along. Well, we have a basketball coach that we like named Tony Bennett for Virginia who likes to do the same thing. And he's always had success by keeping these guys. He'll usually redshirt them first year and then keep them for 5 years total, like a Malcolm Brogdon. And that's not reality anymore. He's having to completely readapt. And you're having guys retire from coaching altogether because they don't want to deal with it. So it's better for the player. It's not as good for the fan or the coach because the coach has spent all this time recruiting and then all of a sudden you're gone after a year. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting counterbalance, but I can definitely understand you as a player's position for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 3 is, would players need to sit out a year the second time they transfer? So this current rule that's coming in, as you just saw in the previous slide, is that all rules are out the window, and essentially you can transfer anytime you want with no retribution, as many times as you want. So what do you guys think here?
I think I like how it is now. After the second time, then you would have to sit. Kind of gives you a little bit of leeway, so in case you end up going into a different situation. But I mean, a lot of these rules, like we've mentioned, could be positive or negative in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's ways we could come up with scenarios where this would be unfair, and then other ones where this would be a perfect rule. So
I find it interesting, Jackson, you said that SEC has its own rules, and they seem to be stricter than the NCAA rules. That's interesting. You can't go to another SEC school, and you have to sit out after the second transfer.
Yep. Yep. If you go through the spring with an SEC football program, you can't transfer to another SEC football program.
That's interesting. Huh.
I think it's just for more so a player could go through the spring, learn all the plays, and then have already a deal set up at another school and go there and completely give it away. So I think the SEC itself is trying to limit that a little bit.
For sure. Number 4 is, how do we minimize impact on less popular sports? Will they lose funding? I think the answer is probably yes. And some of those sports will have to go away, unfortunately. I'm hoping we can minimize that as much as possible. I'm a fan of all college sports. I love lacrosse. I love college baseball. I love all of them. And really, kind of breaks my heart to think about some of the smaller sports having to go away so that we can pay, Caleb Williams $5 million a year.
It's just a reality that lacrosse and hockey are regional,
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is. Not everyone has a lacrosse or hockey team.
Yeah.
And I love those sports.
What can we do to minimize impact on the less popular sports? I guess that's the question here.
Make sure that nobody makes a huge mistake in TV deals.
Mm-hmm.
So that it puts conferences in really unhealthy positions. Maybe require them to sign shorter TV deals so that if something changes drastically, you can get out of it quicker.
And I think what's going to end up happening is football programs and basketball programs are going to end up separating out their budgets from the rest of the general budget. That's what's going to end up happening. And then schools are going to have to make decisions about whether they want to support those sports or not.
Yeah.
Do we want to have a hockey team? Do we want to have a swim team? Do we want to have a lacrosse team?
If you're North Carolina and you have the top brand of any NCAA team and you're 20 to 50 million in the hole, you're going to have to cut your least popular sports. I mean, because sending them out to Berkeley to play on a Tuesday,
Right.
when there's no revenue at all, is going to stop. They're just not going to do it.
Next one is, how do schools still comply with Title IX? Will women's sports lose funding due to new pay-to-play system that is coming? And I think Title IX is under tremendous pressure already, with some situations with men playing in women's sports and with funding that could dry up for women's sports due to the pay-to-play system. So what do you guys think here?
We actually had to go to meetings about Title IX.
Did you?
Yeah, as athletes, they took everybody in and kind of just it wasn't more so about the women's sports as much as like respecting those sports and those people are part of those sports. But I feel like it's definitely taught and talked about a lot more behind the scenes than maybe to the public eye. I think we can keep it balanced. I think there'll definitely be, like we've talked about this whole time, there'll definitely need to be some rules implicated, but I feel like they've done a fairly good job so far. Like we mentioned, it's been pretty smooth so far with the portal and the NIL. Now it's the matter of fact about keeping it that way. But I think I think overall that they could do it, that they could keep it pretty balanced.
Did you guys think that you could compete when you were at Kentucky with the rest of the SEC schools? I mean, did you feel?
Oh, 100%. I mean, every single game we came in with an opportunity to win. I mean, you even saw Georgia, who was supposed to be the best team, came in a couple close games with, Auburn. Same with Alabama, came in a close game with Auburn. We came in close games with a bunch of those teams, Tennessee, Missouri, and even forsaken our bowl game, we played against an ACC team, and it was a really really good game. So I don't think there was really ever a game where we went in feeling like we didn't have a single shot at all.
So was that quarterback the ex-NC State quarterback?
Yes,
was, right?
he was.
Leary, yeah.
Larry.
Yeah. It's actually
Cool.
crazy because my dad went to NC State, so I grew up an NC State fan.
Cool.
I had season tickets to all the NC State games until this past year, obviously, but I like going through like my younger years of high school and stuff like that. I would grow up going to the games and seeing Devin Leary and seeing him play and all that, and then going to Kentucky and be able to walk 5 steps around the corner and he's right there. It was kind of a cool experience for sure.
I bet. Is he a cool guy?
Oh yeah, all those guys are cool. I mean, the most popular guys treat, for the most part, at Kentucky at least, were very humble, had a good head on their shoulders. They, as a backup kicker, they would treat me with the same amount of respect as they would treat their starting wide receiver. So those players, they in the locker room, it really is a brotherhood. I mean, you hear a lot of people say it is brotherhood, but it really is. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what background you come from, what color you are. It does not matter in that locker room. You're treated the same. Those kids would go to war for you, no matter who you are, just because you're their teammate. So you have definitely a special kind of bond. I noticed that a lot when I moved in originally, because I moved in early June, out of high school. So obviously I left all my hometown friends. Didn't really know what to expect going into a whole new world, especially playing a sport. But I mean, after spending a week with those kids on the football team, I felt like I had known them for years. So I feel like there definitely is a special kind of bond there. And, like all those guys, you rarely run across anybody that treats you differently or is very cocky. But yeah.
That's great.
I do think that the last element there, there will have to be some kind of mechanism, whether it's a salary cap or something along the lines of finding a way to balance where I don't think there's much balance right now. It's kind of a free for all, and I think there's a lot of positive results on the students' behalf. So I don't
Right.
want it to sound like I think we need to limit a lot of students' wins, so to speak. But I think there has to be some kind of mechanisms that do not exist today, that I think will make it better. It'll make it clearer for students what their best path forward is, whether it's transferring, whether it's pay to play, or whether it's getting a commercial at your local McDonald's. All those things can be really, really positive and launch you in the right direction. But I think the lack of current rules, it seems like more is needed for, and I hate to get Congress involved because I think they'll just mess it up. But I think the NCAA or whatever sports body ends up emerging from this, whether it continues to be the NCAA or something new emerges, I think they have to have some kind of blueprint on how the leagues are going to operate that are fairly fair, and make sure that at the end of the day, students benefit from the rules, and that it's, that there's not some out of whack approach to it that doesn't have, the students' best interest at heart. So.
Yeah, Jackson, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight, and really loved your perspective on a lot of things. You made me think about some things from a different angle that I hadn't thought of. So thank you so much for joining the Sports Guys, and we really appreciate it. And
thank you for having me.
Had a great episode with you tonight, and really excited to see where this goes. I mean, I'm hoping that it comes out for the best. I'm really happy you're getting better opportunities, you and all your teammates. And I'm going to be pulling for you at App State, man. I want to see all those kicks you're going to make, and hopefully we can have you back in the future, maybe after you make a game-winning kick, or maybe after you're about to sign your NFL contract or something like that.
Yes, sir. That's the goal.
So,
Jax, I got a question for you. Did you see many years ago, were you around yet when App State beat Michigan?
If I was around, I was not involved in football. I never really started following football until I started playing it. So,
I think you were pretty little, but
I probably was.
It was probably the most incredible finish I've ever seen in a game. And I was managing a restaurant at the time, Hickory Tavern in Charlotte. And I remember the whole place going bananas when App State blocked Michigan's kick. And App State won because of it. And they were a huge underdog. And they jumped up on tables, they were throwing napkins in the air, and there was literally screaming at the top of their lungs, probably 300 people in there. And I'll never forget that. And
so cool.
App State
they were in the FCS program at that point too. They weren't even FBS yet.
That's right. That's right. They were a very top-notch. What was it, D2 back then?
No, FCS. It's different.
Yeah. They were very, very good at that level, and they were really about to make the jump. And I think that game actually helped kind of solidify that they were a real deal.
They
actually made the jump the next year after that.
That's right. Sure. Yeah,
and they've upset some big programs since then too. I mean, they really are kind of a giant killer.
They've been really legitimate, for a while. But that kind of, in my mind, that was definitely a point. And so I hope you're able to experience some of those kind of games that are just epic. Because I think App State does some special stuff.
Jackson Moore with a 55-yarder to win it. There you go.
Do it.
Hey, thanks, man. You guys have a great evening. We'll see you guys next time. Please like the video and subscribe. Have a great one.